MLB trade rumors has been filling the rumor mill quite a bit for the Seattle Mariners within the last 24 to 48 hours. We'll look over those two most recent articles detailing fits for Luis Castillo and if the Mariners are shopping Harry Ford this offseason. And finally, since we're coming up on the new year, let's finish it off with some New Year's resolutions. Welcome back to the Hit It Here podcast, episode 152, part of the Bleav network. This episode is the Backlog Gamer episode, and it is a very, very special episode because we are here with the one and only, the ever so requested, not Colton. Not Colton, how are you doing today? It is good to be back on the channel. Listen, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, always fun just to get in on these conversations. I know it's few and far between, pretty seldom, but happy to jump back in here before 2024 wrapped up. Listen, this Luis Castillo fit trade thing article, we'll start there. I know that the Harry Ford thing, it was an older one. Oh, well, who cares, right? Luis Castillo trades, they've been talked about for a month and a half at this point. Like, we're still talking about this is kind of my thought process around it. And listen, Blue Jays, Giants, Orioles are listed as the top three fits. The Giants are interesting. Logan Webb, who's their number two? Like, Corbin Burns would have been great. Obviously, Diamondback kind of swoop in there at the last minute, but the Giants are interesting. I know Lamont Wade Jr. is definitely talked about quite a bit. I don't know if there's another fit, like, trade package in there. Like, if Jerry takes a flyer on like what was his name? Marco Luciano. Like, I don't know if that's gonna, that could be ever part of a trade package involving Luis Castillo. I'm surprised that the Tigers aren't mentioned higher. They're listed as like a long shot, and maybe that's just like on the Luis Castillo front, but Torkelson could be interesting. A trade for Spencer Torkelson from the Mariners, I wouldn't be surprised if something like that does go down. But listen, I think one, Castillo to the Tigers, like for Torkelson, like that's not realistic. Like there's no one on that team other than like Kerry Carpenter that could be interesting in a Castillo trade, but the Tigers say no to that immediately because Kerry Bonds is him. So you're looking at the Blue Jays, the Giants, and the Orioles as like the main suitors. It's just because that's what the article kind of states. Orioles, we've been there, done that. Like, it's the Mount Castle. It's maybe another pitcher. Like, you're not going to get Westberg for Castillo. It's like the same conversation, even more drastic from the Red Sox conversation where it's Cassis for Castillo and no. But they entertained the Cassis and Masataka Yoshida for Luis Castillo, and that doesn't save the Mariners as much money, which is the entire purpose, I think, of trading Luis Castillo. You're not trading Castillo because you want him off your team. You're trading him because you can save money by trading him, but also you can get impact by trading him, and that's been the Mariners' MO as far as what they're trying to do and getting a Luis Castillo trade done. But, I mean, as we sit here, almost heading into the new year, I don't know if a trade for Castillo does get done because it just feels like so exhausted at this point, if that makes sense. Where are you at? Like, what teams, I guess I like the top three, like what makes sense? Like, looking back over the teams, the main ones, like the best fits as listed in the trade rumors article for Castillo. Like, there's plenty of teams that have missed on some of the bigger starters that do make sense for Castillo. And I don't know if it's just by alphabetical order for the best fits, if it's going Blue Jays, Giants, and then Orioles in that way. But for the Blue Jays, like them being listed first, I really think it is an alphabetical thing. And like you said, yes, adding Castillo to their rotation would be good. It would be a stable force for them. They saw some ups and downs from Gausman and like Barrios last year a little bit, but I mean, we all know like kind of what the tail of the tape is. Like, they're veterans. They're guys that have been there, done that. Castillo falls right into that as well, along with obviously Chris Bassett as part of that. But the Blue Jays would have to trade from their lineup, obviously, to get the Mariners to send Castillo over there. And looking at their position player depth, I mean, it's, I think, the Angels and the Blue Jays in the Santander stuff. Like, maybe if they get Anthony Santander, that could be an avenue for them to kind of open up some of their position player crop. I mean, specifically around the infield. I mean, are you going to get like Ernie Clement? Is it Davis Schneider? I don't know if they'd go with Leo Jimenez. I don't know if the Mariners would want him, obviously coming off a suspension last year, but like Schneider's probably the most interesting one to me. But it's not, I don't think it's just Davis Schneider that you'd want. Like it's not just him. Most of these trades, it's not just one guy that's gonna send Castillo one way or the other. Like, yeah, he had a great 2023, an amazing 2023. Davis Schneider did, but in 2024, when he saw more playing time, it did not go nearly as well for him. So, like Schneider, yes, he plays the right position, second base. Can also play a little bit of outfield, which is great. But you'd need to fill that out with another player from the Blue Jays. That's if it's in the like pitching department to like help backfill Castillo's spot, maybe that works out that way. Maybe. I just know like because they've got Addison Barger, they've got Aurelvis Martinez. Maybe that's who got suspended, not Leo Jimenez. Maybe that's who got suspended. I think it was Aurelvis Martinez that got suspended, actually, now that I say that. I don't know. The Blue Jays are an interesting fit. I'm still more interested, I think, in the Orioles because they've got young-ish pitching. In the article, it notes Cade Povich as part of that equation. The hard part is going around the infield, like, you're probably not going to get Kobe Mayo. You probably won't get Jordan Westberg. So, like, it's going to be Mountcastle or Ramon Urias. Like, that and Povich could be interesting, but I don't know. The Castillo stuff, I'm kind of, like, at my end with the Castillo trades. Like, I just don't see it happening. I feel like it would have happened by now. And I know we're about like what 2.5 weeks away from the Roki signing, the impending doom it feels like for the Mariners not getting him. But yeah, like even some of these the next tier down, Braves, Cubs, Red Sox. I find it interesting that the Cubs and Red Sox, yes, they've made moves. They've also been in preliminary talks with the Mariners about Castillo. Why are the Giants and the Blue Jays like ahead of them as far as like fit is concerned? And it's probably just because they've made moves where the other teams haven't. And with the Giants, they just obviously missed out on Corbin Burns, so maybe that's like their pivot. And if they get like Lamont Wade Jr. and like a Tyler Fitzgerald, it's just finding the fit for the Mariners is hard because we know what they want and they're asking the world, which rightfully so. You probably don't want to part with Castillo unless you're getting back legit impact for the next year. And a little bit even beyond that, because, yeah, you're going to save money, great. But also, you need to be able to make sure that you're still in that winning window. Like, you're in your window of contention, so you need to make sure that you're winning in 2025. I don't, like, Castillo, I'm kind of just stick with it. Just stick with it. Trade from the prospects. And that's what the second trade rumors article, I guess it's the older one, but that's what the second trade rumors article was kind of talking about. And listen, regular Colton, not you over there, not Colton, he quoted this article and said, "Brandon Lowe, you are a Seattle Mariner." And everybody who clicked on the article and read it obviously knows that this is not new news. This Harry Ford article have previously expressed interest in Harry Ford. The Rays have, right? They need catching depth. They need a better, just like they need help at that position pretty safely. And yes, they did sign Danny Jansen, but listen, Harry Ford, he's going to probably be a bona fide catcher in 2026 every single day for a team that takes a chance on him. And the Mariners don't see themselves having the space to do that with obviously still employing Cal Raleigh, hopefully in 2026. Trading him and getting back impact for 2025 might not be the worst idea. And the Rays feel like a team that could get the most out of Harry Ford. Like an athletic, twitchy player, kind of like a smallish frame, but somehow will just get the most out of him. Maybe he doesn't stick at catcher eventually. You know, that's the whole point of Harry Ford, is that he's athletic enough to move around the diamond, and maybe he doesn't stick at catcher. But would you rather have Brandon Lowe or Yandy Diaz, or maybe even Pete Fairbanks in a trade that involves Harry Ford. Before I like stake my claim on of the three, maybe four guys that are like actual, I don't say quality MLB contributors because that's kind of discrediting the second part of like the potential trades here, I guess. But if it was between Lau, Yandy Diaz, or like a reliever like Fairbanks or Clevenger, I mean, Lau just makes the most sense. He legitimately does play a position of need before any of the other guys. Like, you can go into 2025 without a Fairbanks or a Clevenger in your pen. You'll probably be okay. Would it be nice? Yes, but it's not as necessary. Same thing with Yandy Diaz. He's not a third baseman anymore. He's going to be a first baseman. So that's taking at bats away from Tyler Locklear. Not to say that he deserves them, but if you feel like you are going to get better production out of Locklear than options that you've got around the other parts of the infield, like Austin Shenton at third, Leo Rivas is still on the team. Like, you're getting Brandon Lau to eliminate Austin Shenton, Leo Rivas. I mean, you're also going to take away at bats from Ryan Bliss and Dylan Moore even at some points. But also, like, in the event that there's a lefty on the mound, like, Lau's probably not going to play anyway. So, like, Rayleigh won't play either. So getting a first baseman like Yandy Diaz, that still leaves you with a hole at third base, as opposed to if you get Brandon Lau, you've got Locklear at first, then you'll have Bliss at second and Dylan Moore at third, should the roster kind of just like stick to where it's at right now. Harry Ford, listen, it would suck to see him go because he really hasn't, I don't want to say he hasn't like underperformed, I don't think, but like personally for me. I mean, he is a high school catcher, drafted, obviously, and those development patterns have not gone exceptionally well across all of MLB, right? But I don't think his development's necessarily going slow or like not according to plan. Like, he's still hitting pretty well. Obviously playing in Dickey Stevens Park in Arkansas. It's not a super like hitter friendly place to hit in. The defense, it's not been super great, but he does have a good reaction time behind the dish, along with like a good arm, like throwing out runners pretty consistently. And with a guy like Cal to be his mentor in the bigs, should he stay with Seattle, there is some validity to the Rays being interested in Harry Ford, their lack of catching depth, etc. It's just, this is old news. This is not something that's super pressing. It's just kind of like a filler type thing to maybe keep the offseason kind of moving. But if Harry Ford stays with Seattle, he's got a great defensive catcher, Platinum Glove Award winner, to help him develop into a good defensive catcher, along with Dan Wilson at the helm, who, by the way, pretty good defensive catcher, just in case anybody didn't know that. So, I don't know. Trading Harry Ford, it's not like the worst idea. I know like prospect fatigue has kind of had him slip down some spots, but also like his overall performance, like you're seeing his peak is not as high as maybe some other guys in the system. And that's where he falls out of the top three and Lazaro Montes takes over, right? So trading Harry Ford, I don't hate the idea. I don't hate the idea of keeping him either. Like, I'm pretty neutral on it, but if it makes the team better in 2025, I'm for pretty much every trade outside of trading one of the young starting pitchers, unless you get like 3 legit everyday bats. Like that, and that's being unrealistic myself, but I think that there's avenues to trade with the Rays where you don't get fleeced and you get things back in 2025 that do help, but that also allow you to continue to make moves. Like, if it's not a Diaz or a Brandon Lau, like the article kind of notes like lower end guys that aren't as proven that you could maybe get along with one of those relievers like a Clevenger or a Fairbanks that help raise the floor of your roster, but don't necessarily make it immediately that much better. But it allows you to still have a little bit of flexibility to go out there in free agency and sign a remaining first baseman or a remaining third baseman or a remaining second baseman. Like, there's options, I think. The thing that I find hard is like when trades with the Rays, I mean, you think back to last year's Rayleigh and Caballero, just like a 1-for-1. Are we just looking at a 1-for-1 like Harry Ford swap with someone? Like, I know that the Mariners need immediate impact, and the Trade Rumors article does kind of note that they're it's not necessarily like saying that what the Mariners could do with a Harry Ford trade or what the Rays will do. It's just like speculative stuff. And that's fine. That's just kind of like where it's at as far as like this whole conversation. And I think this is not necessarily super foundational. It's just a, hey, they like this guy. I mean, yeah, so many people as well in the Mariners community have also talked about how the Rays are super interested in Ty Pete. If you can trade Harry Ford and Ty Pete, I mean, that's two top 10 prospects, probably. I mean, Ty Pete's probably on the outside looking in just barely, but you've got the number 3 overall pick in 2025. You also have a comp round pick. Yes, you just traded them Aiden Miller? That's not his name, is it? Is that his name? What's his name? Who do we trade for to get Randy Arozarena? Who was that? Aiden Miller? That doesn't sound right, but that's the only thing that's coming into my head right now. Hold the phone, please. Hold the phone. Aiden Smith. Aiden Miller's got to be a player somewhere. Like, that's got to be something. And then also Brody Hopkins. And then the player to be named later was like Ty Cummins. Like, doesn't matter. If you do Harry Ford and Ty Pete, what can you realistically get from the Rays? I know Colton's been super high on Jonathan Aranda, kind of like you said, in the past. Maybe even Curtis Mead. Like, those guys are mentioned in the trade rumors article. Yes, they are younger, not proven necessarily bats. But you could get Pete Fairbanks or maybe Garrett Clevenger or Clevenger, however you pronounce it. You can get a high-end reliever if you want to play the run prevention game as opposed to the run scoring game. A run scored is a run earned, or whatever the hell Colton says. If you can prevent the other team from scoring runs, you're going to be looking all right. You know what I mean? The opposing teams, if you get to the 7th, 8th, 9th inning, you've got Clevenger or Fairbanks to Brash to Munoz. You can throw Santos in there. You can throw Snyder in there. You can throw Taylor in there. Like, that bullpen is going to be disgusting. They'll need to fill out, I feel like, a 40-man spot for the Rays a little bit. So, like, you could offer them like a Dom Canzone if you wanted to, or a Leo Rivas, like guys that you're probably not using necessarily, or if it's like a Samad Taylor. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the Rays are doing. Trading Jeffrey Springs to the Athletics, like, that freed up probably a fair amount of cap space. Colton's going to kill me here in that. Payroll. Money that they don't want to pay players in 2025. So, like, the necessity to trade Lau or Yandy Diaz, or even either of the relievers I mentioned, Fairbanks or Clevenger, like, it's probably not, like, of the utmost importance. However, it's the Rays. We know that they just probably don't want to pay them regardless. So if you can give them Harry Ford and Ty Pete, two players that apparently the organization loves. I know that the Mariners are quite fond of them as well, having drafted and developed them. And then you can throw in another player in there. Maybe it's a Cade Marlowe, like a quad A outfielder. Because right now on roster resource, they've got Christopher Morel in their outfield spot. He should not be in the unless they fix his defensive woes as like ASAP. That's going to be a nightmare. I feel like out in either of the corners. He should just be a DH, and hopefully he can cut down on the strikeouts. So that's not the point. Like, a trade with the Rays, I'm just waiting for a move. Truthfully, like, I'm just impatient, and I think trading prospects, keeping the rotation intact, trading prospects to make the team better in 2025 is the way to do it. I know that the limited amount of payroll flexibility is kind of part of that equation as well, which makes it challenging. But if you get a reliever like Fairbanks or Clevenger, that's not the entire budget, and you get help at one of your second or third base spots, I feel like you still have a fair amount of money left if you don't get the Yandy Diaz or the Brandon Lau in that trade. If you get the Jonathan Aranda, you get the Curtis Mead, that allows you to spend a little bit of the money remaining, like the 10-ish million that you probably have left over, on either second or third. This leads us into our final topic here, which is some New Year's resolutions. And I think the way that I've been kind of yapping about needing to make a move, I just need to be more patient. I myself, and I know this is probably New Year's resolutions, more so about the team, about the Mariners, or maybe Mariners fans, etc. Myself, I need to be more patient because clamoring for moves, reactionary moves in the offseason when, yeah, there's still about 2 months left, there's plenty that can happen. There really is. And I've kind of come to terms with the fact that, yes, there have been some key players that I would have been interested in, but at the price for some of them, I'm not entirely moved by it fully. It's just by like the end of January, if we're still looking at this 26-man roster and it's the same, and there's not like a clear direction of how they improved it, I think my impatience will be validated, but that's not something I want. I want the Mariners to do something. So I think their New Year's resolution should be to be less patient. The Mariners front office needs to go out there and make a move. I know I keep being contradictory here, but they need to take what they've learned about guys that they acquired like Luke Raley, Victor Robles. I mean, you can count Randy, you can count Justin Turner. What worked in those situations and apply that to the current pool of players that they're assessing and make sure you hit on them, because this 2025 season is going to be pivotal for, I think, holding on to the Mariners fans that are still holding out hope that 2022 wasn't a fluke, that this organization can be run to be a competitive playoff team. I mean, they were one game away back-to-back years in 23 and 24. Make sure you get over the hump in 2025. I think the thing that, what will get them over the hump in 2025, it just has to be the offense. Like the New Year's resolution for this team, let's go player-based, okay? Let's look at the players on the roster. The resolution going into 2025 is to just be a sponge. Take in every bit of detail that you can from Edgar while he is still part of your coaching staff. Yes, both the guys coming in from the Braves, Seitzer and Mr. Man, that the name is escaping me right now, should do well in their roles. I mean, they helped lead the Braves to, I mean, just look at the quality of the position players on the Braves, offensive production. It kind of makes sense, right? Excluding them from this conversation, I guess, but not to say that they won't have great impact. Like, it's freaking Edgar, man, and we saw how good the offense was down the stretch. Like, they were a top 5? You could argue higher, but like probably like a top 5 baseball team in terms of offensive production. Yeah, the bullpen let them down. The pitching staff maybe didn't have it every single night, but the offense was more or less the most consistent aspect of the team. And that's kind of crazy to think about when you look back at 2024 and be like, what did the offense do? Because if you look at it as a whole, the team is an above average offense by WRC plus, which we know is a flawed metric by now, but it still tells a pretty decent story. Yet they lost so many games because of how putrid the offense was. Just know that Edgar has some sort of like holy grail of knowledge as far as hitting is concerned, and take that all the way to the bank and help out this pitching staff by giving them a top 10 consistent offense the entire year. They can be a top 10 offense and have best peak months of all time, but have the lowest of lows where you're losing games because of it. If they can remain consistent, that is what will help them win more games in 2025. But I mean, it's hard to argue against Edgar. That does feel like a pretty easy, I guess, goal or resolution to follow. Follow and understand and listen and take in everything that you can from one of the greatest hitters to ever live, pretty much. Understand that his tutelage will help you be better, and I think we saw that at the end of the last season as well. So couldn't agree more. The offense, as much as we like to talk about how good the pitching needs to be going into next year, because we saw how bad the offense was last year and how good the pitching was and it kept us in games, it didn't do enough. And so the offense definitely does need to step it up. They need to just do what they did in those last 30 games and just put it for a full 162, and the team, it'll be a night and day difference. But that is going to do it for episode 152 of the Hit It Here podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode, this whole year of episodes. Episode 152, that's crazy that we've made it this far. Really do appreciate you guys tuning in for these. And this was the Ryan Archer episode of the podcast, and go Mariners.